Live.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the launch of Creativity in Crisis. My name is Devika Gina, and I was a mentee on the program a couple of years ago, and now I'm a mentor, and I'm loving every minute of it. Beyond that, I'm a communications manager for an environmental nonprofit based in London, and today I'm joined by my fellow co-host and fellow cog in the Tattva machine, Raghav Chandegra. Hey, Raghav.
Hey Devika, thanks for that introduction. It's good to have you here, and we'll be having all the authors join today. So I've been part of Tattva for the last few years, fortunately, and the last 2-3 months we've been really busy. We've had lots of activity since the lockdown, and you guys are on Facebook Live right now, and I'm sure it's probably not the first time you've seen Tattva on Facebook Live, because we've pretty much had it live every weekend and sometimes twice a week as well. So lots of activity. Now, one of the first things we did was a creative writing class where we asked people to share some stories around the pandemic. And from that, we created this book, which I've got here, okay? So I'm going to hand over to Devika to talk about Creativity in Crisis.
Thank you, Raghav. And yes, this is Creativity in Crisis, Tattva Press's 6th publication, which is pretty cool. And it's an extra special one as well. In recognition of the fact that we're all going through an unprecedented, difficult time right now, all proceeds from this book will be donated to the National Emergencies Trust Coronavirus Appeal, because to get through this, we all need to help each other out. And the book itself is very unique also, because it contains 26 unique perspectives from authors that have submitted to the book. Some of them are new, some of them are seasoned writers, and all of them offer a very candid perspective into what living with this pandemic is like right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned pandemic, and the coronavirus pandemic has been a harsh reality for all of us. It's been impacted everyone all over the world, and we've all had very different stories to tell. Now, the British Indian community, amongst other ethnic minorities, have been quite severely impacted by the virus. You might have come across a statistic that 40% are more likely to die from the virus from those in the ethnic minority background, which is quite a scary figure when you think about it. Now, every day, I scroll through social media and I come across memes and stuff all about the pandemic and what's going on. I'll tune into the news and the coronavirus briefing, but it would be a real shame if those were the only ways that I thought about what was going on. One of the reflections we had after that first class was that actually there are some voices here that really need to be in the public space. So hence Creativity in Crisis was born, because what we want is that in a few years' time, this book will be the window into the minds of those quite severely impacted by the pandemic. So a lot of heartfelt stories, but some light-hearted ones as well. So I'm going to hand over to Devika and just tell us a bit more about what we've got installed for us today.
Thanks for that, Raghav, and all for the importance of human stories, especially right now. And I want you all to buckle up, get comfy. You're not going anywhere. We've got you for the next 90 minutes or so, and it's going to be a fantastic afternoon. So get ready to really enjoy yourselves. Before we get started, I'd like to invite Jazz Kaur Sharma, a real stalwart of a woman and phenomenal writer, to read her forward to the book. So Jazz, over to you.
Thanks, Devika. Super proud to be a part of this. So yeah, very excited about this launch. There are many words over the last few weeks which we have been accustomed to hearing. Unprecedented, the new normal, and of course, global pandemic. So easily these words have slipped into our daily vernacular, and yet for many, they still feel difficult to fully confront and absorb. It's hard to comprehend readjusting to life after the pandemic. And for many of us, things will never be the same. The impact of COVID-19 has sent ripples through our communities. Loved ones have lost lives in the loneliest of circumstances. Families are mourning in isolation. Businesses have suffered immensely, and so many have lost their livelihoods and their security. It's easy to see how the last weeks could be defined by profound pain and distress. We live in fear of the one thing that we took for granted, human interaction. And yet, in times of trouble, humankind seems to have an unwavering ability to find moments of hope, community, and generosity. We've embraced technology to connect with family and friends. We have volunteered to help the elderly and vulnerable, and we have found our compassion. Never has this been reflected more than in the hordes of incredible key workers who continue to help us every single day. You are a testament of what it means to be selfless and truly are the beating heart of our society. My very personal thank you is to the frontline workers, day after day, risking their own health and lives to keep us safe. While my own father was fighting for his life on a respirator in intensive care after contracting the virus, I have no doubt that it was your expertise, care, and attention that helped him pull through. I'm incredibly grateful that he is now back home recovering, and I'm under no illusion that I owe being able to write that last line to you. As we try to navigate the current situation and cope with the uncertainty, we have also found outlets of creativity, of long forgotten talents and passions we pushed aside due to a lack of time and space. Sharing our perspectives through creativity is imperative in a time like this. When we record current perspectives, it will be a window into the minds of people during the crisis in years and perhaps even decades to come. When all of this is a distant memory, we hope this publication will be able to provide insight and reflection on a time which impacted us all, and our micro stories can be part of the macro story to help provide deeply personal narratives and points of view in these unprecedented times. All proceeds of this publication are going to the National Emergencies Trust, a nationwide charity doing fantastic work to help and support families and individuals most affected by the coronavirus outbreak. So here we are on the pages of Creativity in Crisis, an anthology of a variety of perspectives on the pandemic, some thought-provoking, some humorous, and all incredibly unique.
Wow, it was such a moving piece there, Jazz. And I've read your piece so many times, but just when I listened to it then, it really does really almost made me cry at one point. But no, thank you. It was an honor to have your piece as the foreword. So thank you for that. Now, all the contributions bar one have been written. So if you have got this book, okay, you may have noticed the beautiful illustrations that are here. And these illustrations have been done by a good friend of mine, but an even better illustrator, and he's okay at jokes, Sanjay. He goes by @it's like this only on Instagram. And so I asked Sanjay if he could do an illustration which was dedicated to all key workers. So if you have the book and you actually look closely at the front cover, you can see how that is portrayed through his really clear and beautiful illustrations there. So really cool. It was great to have it. Great for him to lend that illustration for us to use as the front and back cover. Sanjay, hey, good to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Could you just tell us a little bit more about your illustrations and how that's played a part in your time during this lockdown?
Yeah, so, well, firstly, again, thank you for having me here. I think it was only at the beginning of the year did I start re-engaging with illustrations and drawings. I think I neglected all of that while pursuing, studying and career, and, being an artist was never really on the cards. So that Pixar animation career was shot down very early on. I started It's Like This Only just as a way of whatever kind of jokes that I have internally. And obviously I tell you guys, my friends, and they're not particularly, well, they're met with eye rolls and groans and grunts and other kind of noises as well. But I thought to myself, let me just put my fantastic humor but combine it with some of my art skills. And even though I think I'm not very good, the art cartoons and the jokes and the storytelling that I've been doing on It's Like This Only has been quite well received. And I've had a couple of other people that tell me on the post that throughout this particular time the weird that we're going through at the moment, it's been nice for them to receive some sort of humor, which is fantastic at the end of the day. Even though a lot of it's geared towards Gujarati language, I will be making other sort of non-Gujarati puns and jokes as well. But it's kept me sane. It's allowed me to focus on something other than work, other than PS4 and all these other kinds of things. It's not. It's one of those things where when you're in that creative process, you become so absorbed, and it's almost like a meditation where you forget about everything else. And it's not really about cutting yourself off of whatever's happening, but that meditation allows you to express yourself in an artistic, creative form. And I think that's been it's been a massive help. Whenever I feel a bit crap, I'll whip out my sketchbook or my iPad Pro, and I'll start drawing, and I'll start coming up with stories. And just yesterday I created a story which hasn't been published yet, but about my dad and me going shopping, or him going shopping and bringing home like treats and things. So it's all about trying to tell your stories, but in a creative way. And I think that resonates very, very well with Creativity in Crisis, because they are 26 different stories from their own perspectives and on how the environment is affecting them. And I think we're both doing very similar things, but in different ways.
Thank you for that, Sanjay. And I have to say that I love your illustrations. You're very talented.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I have to say also that I like the jokes as well. I appreciate the kind of dad humor that you've got going on.
Well, easy on the dad thing, but yeah, thank you.
I like dad humor, don't worry. I mean it as a compliment.
I'll wear it as a badge of honor.
Yeah, do. And I also like the fact that you're making points that other people need to really listen to in a way that I think is very engaging and compelling. I think there is, so the recent sketch that you did on the imposter.
Yes.
That's one that I'd like to, yeah, I like it. I'd like to show that to some colleagues. I think they could learn a lot from you. So well done.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. It's great to have you here today. And as we know, frontline workers, particularly doctors, they are working night and day to keep us all safe, keeping our NHS going at a very difficult time. And we have a few that have contributed to the book, and I'd like to invite 3 to share their perspectives on what it's like to be a doctor right now and treat patients with coronavirus. So I'd like to invite Asha, Rijul, and Rajiv to share their perspectives. And Asha and Rijul, I'd like to invite you two in particular to share some excerpts from your pieces that you shared, because they are very hard-hitting and very moving. As Raghav said earlier, when reading your pieces, I struggled to fight back the tears. So please share them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should I start? Should I go? Yeah, it's just been a fantastic opportunity to get involved with something for as good a cause as this at as difficult a time as this. I love Rajiv and Asha's pieces as well, by the way. I thought it kind of provided quite a nice rounded perspective on different aspects of how it's been like, the front line and on the wards and indeed beyond. I think, particularly for me, my piece was written at quite a difficult time after quite a difficult week at work. And I'm not usually someone that writes stuff that's that melancholy, but it did come out quite dark. And I think that's just how I was feeling. And it was quite cathartic to get it out into paper. I don't know if it was a similar sort of thing for you, Asha and Rajiv, just that's how it felt for me. And it was a lovely thing to do and to see it on paper, yeah, it's just really special.
And would you like to read an excerpt from your piece?
Yeah, absolutely.
For everyone to... Thank you.
To take a breath, to hold it in, to feel your lungs swell. That, my friend, is a privilege. To walk unaided, to speak unhindered, to sleep undisturbed. That, my friends, is a privilege. I've never seen more suffering, identical in its form, in my brief career as a doctor. The monotony and predictability are brutal. High flow oxygen, a chest x-ray that looks ghastly, blood tests that show their lungs' demand for oxygen has long since outstripped their supply. The violent trajectory along which these patients often progress makes each personal story of tragedy, of a lost loved one, friend, or family member starker. On the news, we see figures. On the front line, we see eyes widened. We see the fear of the unknown, the terror of not speaking English, yet finding yourself without a relative able to be by your side and provide translation. We see you gasping for air that for others seems so plentiful. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. And your piece does a very good job of, I'm not a medic, I could never be, but helping me and others, I'm sure, understand what it must be like to see such pain and tragedy unfolding before your eyes, and the loneliness as well. So thank you for sharing that important reading for all of us.
Thank you.
Asha, yours also does a very good job of that. So I'd like you to also share an excerpt of your piece for everyone to hear, please.
I think similar to Rachel, it was sort of written during a week that was pretty bad at work, and I think sometimes it's hard to talk about these things, but writing was a way of release. My piece is called All Quiet on the Healthcare Front. Gown on, mask on, gloves on. Ready for battle, I begin my war round. My heart sinks. Another fatality. I call her name, no response. I shake her shoulders, no response. My instinct is to put out a cardiac arrest call, but I cannot. The decision has already been made not to resuscitate her. I examine her body. I confirm her death. This routine has become all too familiar. Time of death, 9:02. I close my eyes and am reminded of history books, bodies strewn across no man's land. They are names to be signed on death certificates. They are numbers to be added to the ever-growing total. They are loved ones who never got the chance to say goodbye. They are civilians spending their final days alone and afraid. I prepare myself for the worst part of my job. This is the first of 3 identical conversations I will have today. The dial tone is a siren of impending doom. Pause. My voice is a melancholic melody on repeat over the telephone. I am calling about your mother. Pause. As doctors, we are given training to deliver the words that nobody wants to hear. I am so sorry, but I have some bad news. Pause. She's dead. Pause. Thank you.
Asha, again, just reading it and listening to it now, it's hard to fight back the tears. Thank you for sharing that. I think we all need to hear it. Those daily briefings that Raghav mentioned earlier, I watch them every day, and the numbers are there, and you're watching them, hoping for them to go down. But hearing stories like this really help one to remember that there are people and families behind those numbers. And I'm reminded of the 13-year-old boy who died in Brixton, which is where I live in London. And that story of a 13-year-old boy, again, really hit the jugular for me, as all of these do for everyone on so many different ways. Thank you to both of you. And now, Rajiv, you are another frontline worker. You are a GP and the Tattva coordinator, one of the first, and you obviously know the importance of sharing stories. I mean, that's why Tattva has come to be. But right now, what do you think about the importance of sharing such stories at a time like this? Could you share some insight for us all there?
Sure. Hi, guys. I think reflecting on this entire project, actually, it reinforces this idea that stories have the power to transform our lives and society. And that's not just because we tell stories, but we actually think in terms of stories. We create them inside our heads every single day. And whether it's a personal or a global crisis, we use stories to help us get through struggles. And that could be through folk songs or poetry or dance or drama or literature. They all convey these micro stories, which are very specific. But I think the hallmark of our culture, our civilization, is that all these micro stories point to something much greater. Either it's a macro story or a higher set of values. And I think creativity in crisis, I suppose for me, is our combined small contribution to that history. What I see is 26 authors, all with diverse stories, but with one purpose, and that's to create that history. I suppose Tattva, yes, on the outside, it's an organization, but actually at a deeper level, it's an aspiration, because for the first time in history, we are that generation who have the skills and the resources to push the frontiers of Indian, or more accurately, Bharatiya culture to the world. Not our parents or grandparents. They've done their bit. They've made their sacrifices to preserve it, but it's now up to us. We hold the baton to reignite, to reinvent our culture and share it with the world, because we've got something profoundly unique to offer. And I think it's times like this that remind us that in the past, there have been myriads of ancient cultures and civilizations, the Roman, Egyptian, Greek, but all of them now reside in museums. Ours is the one that doesn't reside in museums. It resides in our homes and hearts. It's a living, breathing, dynamic civilization. It's not based on rigid institutions or ideologies. It's one that boldly declares one of the highest ideals, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is one family. So I suppose my reflection on this is almost a humble invitation to all of us here to not see this project as a completion, but actually as a beginning of a lifelong pursuit to be ambassadors of our culture and hold that as our central purpose. And if you want to challenge that through literature, Tattva will be the home for that.
Wow. Thank you, Rajiv, for sharing that with us. Yeah, it definitely does inspire us to continue to share stories. And it doesn't just stop at Creativity in Crisis. Thanks, Asha and Rujal, as well, for sharing that. Definitely gives us a glimpse into the real stories that go on in front line behind the numbers. Each of those stories is one number, and we know how high they've got. So yes, thank you. Moving on now, we've been very fortunate to have Dheerajji, members of the elder community, and Nareshji to contribute to the book. And it's interesting, Rajiv mentioned Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Both Dheerajji and Nareshji were imparting their reflections on what was going on, and they had very similar themes. Now, we're joined by Dheerajji today, who's a community leader, is a pharmacist by profession, very active in the community and based in Birmingham. Dheerajji, thank you for being here. Can you just talk us about the main concepts around your piece, around this idea of the whole world as one family, and how that's important, during this quite challenging time?
Essentially, the feeling of one family you only realize during crisis time that the wider humanity is one family. During day-to-day time, you are individual. You think in as an individual. The nearest feeling that you have is normally your family, the inner family. It's during this crisis when everyone is suffering, and you all know that it's not your suffering, but the suffering around the surrounding of you, that you feel that yeah, you are part of it. And I was just listening to some of the pieces here, and listening to them also brings about empathy, feeling of tears in our eyes. We feel we are connected, and that connectedness itself is nothing but a sign of oneness, and we are all one part of a huge human family, the whole world. This concept has been there in our civilization for thousands of years, and because of that one concept, that we have survived through calamities, crises, and we are still thriving as a civilization. And when I was viewing, and I've gone through some of the crises in the past, and I've realized, I'll just give you one example that will highlight how one feels when they see poverty, sufferings around. I'm talking of one young university student. Now, this is going back in 1966, 67. He was studying at Leeds University. At that time, there was a very huge famine in India. You know, thousands were homeless, roaming around, were dying. And he was viewing that on television, and he felt, look, oh, something is happening. I must go. His parents were in East Africa. Without telling them, he went to the airport, bought a ticket, and flew to Delhi, leaving his education. And he went there in Delhi, and he said, look, I talked to his friends, and I want to help. Now, why did that feeling come? That feeling comes in because he sees an empathy, he sees a connectedness. He sees himself being there. And that feeling is actually nothing but feeling of oneness and feeling of we are part of the large family. So when I saw Captain, when I heard about Captain Tom Moore, almost 100 years old, at that time he felt as well that I must do something. It embodies when you feel that strong, and the nearest you can feel strong is your kith and kin, your siblings. But when that kind of strong feeling comes for others as well, then you feel that you're part of the family. And he actually symbolized how every individual in the society today, frontline workers, many people who are probably unemployed, but they're still giving their time to the society. That symbolizes this concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam. And it's during this crisis that that feeling comes in, and actually during normal times, we tend to forget it. But reality is, yes, we are all one family. This is what I feel can be marked as we can see us seeing it today in front of our eyes. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dheeraj. Yeah, like you said, the crisis has brought the world together. And let's just hope that we've learned of the power of being as a family, and that togetherness and connectedness in the way we approach all the challenges that come, because the pandemic isn't the only challenge that we have here, and we'll touch on some of the other challenges that we do face. But no, thank you, Dheeraj, for your submission and also sharing that with us. Just moving on now to Bhavan Baines. Hey, it's good to have you here. Your title was called Blessings from Bibiji. Now, very much about your grandmother. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that piece? The importance of looking after our elders around this time. How have you stayed in communication? Yeah, it would be great to hear from you.
Yeah, hi. So I've always lived with my Bibiji and Babaji, and so each year my grandma, she goes to India for 2 months. So she left in February time, and she was supposed to come back in April, but because of lockdown she wasn't able to. So yeah, she's been there since February, and luckily we've got extended family out there who take really good care of her, and especially I think living in a village where everyone always comes around to our house, obviously maintaining social distancing and everything. but there's a really good community feel there. So we know she's being looked after well. Yeah, so like the importance of looking after our elders, I think. So I'm Sikh, so a big part of that is seva, and looking after our elders is a way of doing that seva. So my nan Niju, she lives like an hour away, and each week we go and visit her and drop off food and things like that. And so yeah.
No, thanks, Bevan. I hope, your BBG, you'll be connected with her again soon. And yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. Her piece can be read in the book Creativity in Crisis. And we're going to move on now to Devika, and she's going to introduce the next few authors.
Yes, thank you for that, Raghav, and thank you, Dirishji and Pavan, for your perspectives there. Very valuable, and really enjoyed listening to you both. In the spirit of teaching and learning, I'd like to now invite Bhavin Taylor and Rishi Handa to another two very integral cogs in the Tattva machine and teachers as well to the floor to share their perspectives. So hi Bhavin, hi Rishi, great to have you on the call with us today. I want to ask, you guys have been involved in Tattva for a while now, but speaking specifically about creativity in crisis, could you have imagined 6 weeks ago that we would have inspired 26 new authors to create this book? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Hi all, Vish, I'll start, is that all right? I joined Tattva a year ago as a mentor, so last January, and then this year I'm now the program director, and this year we've got 16 participants, so budding authors who are on a journey, and obviously in these times we've made the program go virtual, which is not what we anticipated earlier in the year when we put the program together. So along with myself, Rishi, and a few others who are on this call, we put that program together. So those of you that don't know about it, please do look at the Tattva website. There's a bit of a plug there. To answer the question for Devika, the answer is yeah. I do believe we could have put this together. Yeah, put our minds and our hearts and our efforts together, and we can achieve. That's probably not the answer you wanted, but hey.
I like it. I like it.
I know Rishi and I connected with teachers, so I'm grateful for all the frontline workers in the NHS and beyond. But as teachers, I'm a deputy head of a secondary school in West London, and I know the work that my colleagues and teachers up and down the country have been putting in to ensure homeschooling happens. But also, some of us have been in. I go in every other week to look after the children of key workers, or vulnerable children. So yeah, there's been a lot of effort that have been devoted from those on the front line, but in other institutions like education. So yeah, well done to everybody. Bish.
Thank you for that, Bav.
Hi. So I've been part of with Tattva as a mentor right from the beginning, and as with Bav this year, I'm one of the program directors. I certainly didn't think that this was given that Tattva Press has been relatively a recent endeavor, I certainly didn't think that, excuse me, we'd be publishing something like this so quickly. I remember when we had the task to do of penning those pieces, I thought it was simply just going to be just an exercise, a personal exercise, but I certainly didn't think that it'd all come together for this. So quite an achievement.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. I think Tattva, for those of you watching who aren't familiar with Tattva, we are a program that is meant to springboard authors, which is something we do. We have been doing that since day one. I think what this exercise shows, and by this exercise I mean creativity in crisis, is that we can still do that in a very short and intense amount of time. And I think the collective efforts of everyone involved in this project have been phenomenal, and very proud to be of a network like this and to be rubbing shoulders with the likes of you and Bav as well. So thank you to both of you for your efforts you're putting into Tattva and for your submissions to Creativity in Crisis. For those of you watching, you can read both of their pieces. They're called A Curtain Twitcher by Bhavin Taylor and Judgment and Opportunity for a Teacher in Quarantine by Rishi Handa. I definitely recommend both of them. Quite different in tone and style, but you'll enjoy them both very much. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll be moving on and changing it up. We're going to have another reading, which is cool, a very different style of piece from what we've sort of heard already. So I'm going to ask Sunit Javda, who's from Warwickshire. His title of the book was called, of his piece was called Coronavirus. And could you just take the stage and read your piece? That would be great.
Thanks, Raga. Thanks, Devika. Yeah, like you said, it's a slightly different style and a bit of a, with elements of sort of humour there and just a bit lighter. I think that just reflects sort of how I like to document these kind of events. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. Coronavirus has hit, aka COVID-19, a virus of the kind that the world has never seen. The time out that we all crave has been granted to us. Let's not find a reason to moan like a Brit generally does. Pandemic movies on the TV like some sort of strange joke. A new topic for us all to talk about with our fellow human folk. Daily news briefings as the events unfold. All we hope for is that the truth be told. Our top advisors, Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance, deliver their updates with clarity and balance. Government issued advice which they then had to enforce as we aim to flatten the curve and alter the virus's course. Self-isolation and lockdown to reduce the spread as many of us get used to working, rolling out of bed. A bunch of new words, furloughed being one. At least the weather during this period has mostly involved sun. A spike in the use of Zoom, House Party and Teams, alongside a series of rather amusing memes. Chancellor Sunak could be named Rishi Rich as he aims to save the economy from this crazy surge. Communities pulling together, wishing people well, key workers marching on, holding society together like gel. Credit where credit's due, as most have adapted well. Please don't panic buy, because the shops have plenty to sell. Stay home, protect our NHS and save lives. Let's all do our bit to increase the number of us that survive.
That was cool. I really enjoyed that. I'm sure a lot of you did as well. Some really quite funny bits in there. But yeah, some of these lines we'll completely forget about, especially like the house party. I deleted house party with this random rumor that went around. I was that victim. But
me too.
I just got reminded of that from your poem. So no, and amongst other other very timely things. So thanks, Sunit, for that. I'm going to hand back over to Devika to lead the next section.
Thank you, Raghav, and thank you, Sunit, for that incredible poem. The fact that you can write poetry like that, I'm so impressed. I've tried and I've failed many, many times. So again, massive kudos to you. So now on to another subject, which a lot of people are talking about right now, and they have been for decades before, and that is climate change, or the climate crisis, as many are calling it. And I'd like to speak to Harsh Thakur about his perspectives on the climate crisis and how the COVID-19 crisis is impacting that. So Harsh, tell me what you think. What are the implications of COVID-19 on climate?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, thanks for having me. For me, I think, and the reason I wrote this piece was really kind of two-piece. One was a bit of a stark warning, and the second one with a bit of sense of optimism. And I think the warning piece comes from, I think we've all seen, you know, all the Instagram photos going around. We've seen all the facts and figures around how, you know, on all the metrics of climate change, the crisis has been good. I mean, we've seen massive reductions so far this year. I think we're at like 5.5% reductions in CO2 emissions this year, which is unprecedented. And even, you know, in our cities, we've seen big falls in emissions, and everything looks good. But actually, there's a fear, and actually my sense of, fear that we're going to get quite complacent, and which is why I kind of wrote this piece. And it was really triggered by, more than anything, I was out on a bike ride a few days after the lockdown hit, and couldn't believe how quiet it was. And it was again kind of bringing myself back to reality that don't get used to this. This isn't normal. And similarly with the climate change, I think there is a real risk as we come out of this recovery that actually things get worse. And actually we have so much more to do collectively and individually. We shouldn't really be getting complacent.
Absolutely agree. And working in the climate space as well, specifically on city climate action, I am reassured by what some cities are doing to build back better, which is the now semi-official lingo for what the green recovery might look like, which is great to see. But my optimism is very cautious because there's so much more that national governments and corporations need to do to make sure that we don't bounce back to normal, because that can't be the option for us now. And Harsh, I can't speak to you about climate and not talk about your role in the electric mobility space. We're connected on LinkedIn now, so I've
That's
done
great.
Snoop. Yeah. And you are also a founder of the Good Plate Company with Raghav as well. So climate is clearly an issue that's very close to your heart, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way I've tried to approach it is just practically what can I do and play my piece in really providing an alternative. And yeah, the Good Plate Company was there as an option to provide an alternative. And the work that I do with Shell around electric mobility is again giving consumers an option to move towards a clean transport system.
Absolutely, all for it. So kudos to you again. I think playing a proactive part in this other very pressing crisis that humanity is facing, it's not going to go away. We all need to roll our sleeves up and do something, and you're doing exactly that. So kudos. I'm saying that a lot right now, but seriously, kudos to everyone involved in creativity in crisis. I'm very impressed. But someone else who unfortunately couldn't join us today on the call is Hrishikesh Vadakul, and his piece on the COVID paradox is another that I definitely recommend. And this addresses the question of whether Mother Earth is recovering, or if this is barely a silver lining, as Harsh and I were just discussing. So I definitely press you to read it once you buy a copy of the book.
Yeah, thanks, Devika and Harsh, and Rishi as well for submitting that piece. Just thinking, about this connectedness that we have with other people. When you put the environment first is when you start to extend that connectedness to nature and the animals. And when you put that amongst your fellow human beings, that is really when you make those choices that then become quite easy to make, choosing a reusable coffee cup when you go to your coffee shop. Or eventually switching to electric vehicle when they become more available. So, when you start to connect yourselves to a deeper level, certainly those decisions can become easier. And certainly when they become on trend, it's easier to do as well. So we're going to move to the next part where I'm going to introduce Brother. So Brother, hey, thanks for joining us.
Hey Raghav, thanks very much.
Hey, so Brother, we spoke the other day. Your piece is titled "Political Consensus During Time of Crisis." Now, when we spoke the other day, you said sort of your real interest really sparked around the Brexit referendum time. In fact, many of us will resonate with that. But since then, you've been very much engaged with what has been going on in government and politics, and you've been forming your own opinions as well, which is really great to see. Your piece is a great read. Could you just sort of share your thoughts around your article that you had written for us?
Sure, absolutely. I guess all of it starts by this feeling that this whole pandemic, it's exposing all the fault lines within our society at the moment. Things that are going wrong, we're suddenly much more acutely aware of them. And that, I think, has provided a natural opportunity to just take stock of what's going on in politics as well. I think where we are with our politics, we're in a massively, massively polarized position. You've got one party saying one thing, another party saying another thing. At times, I liken it to the Manchester derby. So you've got Man United on one side, Man City on the other. They're not going to engage with each other. Their sole aim is beat each other in whatever way possible. And we're looking at two camps that are getting further and further apart. We're seeing that with in December last year, I think, there was a vote on Brexit about should we allow for a no deal or should we not? And 21 Conservative MPs who said, we don't want to fall off a cliff edge, got kicked out of the party. So you're either in or you're out. Before then, we've had a lot of talks about the Labour Party deselecting candidates that don't agree with their views. And all of this it's contributing to this very divided political space. Fortunately, I think there's a shining light starting to sort of bloom, like we're starting to see on the environment. And in this case, I think that shining light is the new leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. He's started saying, let's get rid of this needless division. Let's constructively engage with each other. He suggested, why don't we have a government of national unity? I'd be happy to be involved in that, which is where representatives from all the parties come together. Those examples tell us that when we're faced with a massive crisis like this one, and I think Dheeraj mentioned this earlier, we suddenly come together. We suddenly come together, start working together, and we recognize that we have a common goal. But then the question comes, why only in a crisis? Why can't we make this part of the new normal? Don't we all have a responsibility to look after the welfare of society in some way, no matter what part of the political spectrum we come from? Fundamentally, it comes back to this idea of we all are one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We've all got some part to play in actually making this whole world a better place. So really, it's why stop here? Let's keep this going in the future.
Thank you, Pravar, for those reflections. And just listening to you speak right now, I think for a long time it's become apparent that this strategy of divide and conquer has never worked. And as you say, why in a time of crisis do we start to think, oh, is this working for us? Why can't something different to divide and conquer become our new business as usual? And I think there's a lot for people across the political spectrum to think about and reflect on and draw some serious lessons learned for the other side of this crisis. So thank you for that. And I'm sure you and I could talk about this at length. Let's put a date in the diary for that, because I'd like to discuss this with you. But moving on to another subject that people are talking about quite a lot right now, and very rightly so, is mental health. And we're joined today by 5 people, 5 creatives, some of them writers, some of them poets and podcasters, which is very cool, a very interesting mix that we have here, to talk about how writing is helping them through this time right now, specifically their submissions to creativity and crisis. So I'd like to welcome to the floor Aman Grover, Raki Sachdev, Palika Sood, Sharandeep Kaur, and Kajal Desai. Hi everyone, how are you doing?
Hi.
Hello.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Great to have you all with us today. And I'd like to open with a question to all of you. How has writing, particularly your submissions to creativity and crisis, helped provide some refuge or solace during this very difficult time? Could you share some thoughts on that question? So, Raki, you go first.
Hi. I think it's putting it out onto paper and just making it real in a way. It's very real, of course, it's very real, but it's so internal that it's almost quite, you don't know how to deal with it. And so when you put it out onto paper, you're able to like let all these jumbled thoughts just flow and just almost feel better for it.
Yeah, I get that. You're kind of problem solving your thinking patterns like out on paper, and it's a very cathartic experience, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's really helpful. And I'm finding that very helpful right now with some of the very heavy subjects I'm writing about right now, but it's very handy. Thank you for that, Raki. And Aman, what are your thoughts on that question? What would you like to share with everyone?
Thank you for having me. I think personally, being someone that's actively using social media, I've tend to found that I'm seeing a lot of everyone's in this little personal development bubble as such. So you're seeing a lot of people posting their book reviews and baking and even starting podcasts, etc. And for me, I came across a book called Atomic Habits, which I've been putting off for about a year and a half. And in the book, the author highlights fair weather meditator as a term.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of us can relate, where we tend to be professional with our habits only on the days where it's sunny, and then so the author was comparing professionals as people who commit even when they're not really feeling up for the mood for it, and amateurs as dictating how you're feeling. And for me, the reason I put my thoughts to paper was this. The coronavirus and being at home has given me the opportunity to really hone in on myself, and I've hit a streak as such when it comes to meditating every day, which is something I never thought would happen. Before, I was someone who meditated depending on how I felt in the morning. So that's where it kind of pen to paper, hitting that consistency, I realized was something I didn't know I had in me. And when I'd meditated for that consistent period of time, I wanted to write about it. And that's why this came about. And I'm really glad that it did.
Thank you, Aman. And I think that personal development curve or bubble that you spoke about earlier, that's something that I'm definitely going through. And I think, Raki, your reflections on getting everything out on paper, I'm not sure what your take is on this, but I would definitely say that that's part of that personal development bubble, because how can you develop without really knowing yourself and really confronting everything? I think at a time like this, when people are very isolated, it does give one plenty of time to really get to know yourself and really dig deep, which is a helpful, if not difficult, exercise. And writing definitely helps with that. Thank you. And Sharandeep and Kajal, what do you make of this? What are your reflections? So Sharandeep, you go first.
Is
Sharon on the call?
I think we'll just switch to Kajal.
Kajal, if you'd like to share your thoughts.
Deep for a sec there.
Sure, thanks for having me. So for me, I'm a final year student, and I kind of found that a lot of people around me, as soon as we sort of entered this crisis, started stressing about having to be inside. And for me, I just didn't relate, because I kind of, to be honest, lived my life sort of this way anyway, in that I stayed more inside than went outside. So I thought it was quite important to sort of give that different perspective of actually finding peace in being inside, and it doesn't have to be such a bad thing. Often we get so caught up in like running from one place to the next, like going out for dinner, wherever we might be going, that we actually don't spend time in our homes, or as a student, like in the place that you're paying to live at. So for me, it was kind of just sitting down, putting those reflections down on paper and sharing them, and giving a different insight that it doesn't have to be such a stressful time. It can actually benefit us in the long run.
Great, thanks, Kajal. I think you're kind of thinking about this process and how this new way of being might help us in the long run is a very apt reflection for everyone to hear. And I think everyone has been thinking about maybe. I don't think Sharon is here with us, but I would like to invite Balika. Your piece, Lease of Time, is something I found very relatable. Would you like to share a little bit about that piece and read it to the floor?
Yeah, sure. So with my story, it's kind of that I had to make a decision of moving from London back home to Liverpool, where I haven't lived for 8 years. So it's kind of like a big change of having my independence and having this kind of free roam of my life to kind of doing something that scared me a little bit to come home, because it almost felt like maybe I'll be taking a step backwards. And I wasn't sure whether it was the right decision or not. And I think after I wrote the piece and everything, I think during this time I found that moods and emotions can kind of go from one extreme to the other. You're either really great or you're really not great. And I think writing's definitely helped me. And then I've been like doing workshops and stuff, like writing workshops, and my friends have said, you know, they found them quite therapeutic and things. So I think my piece is kind of about how that's helped me find clarity with the situation that I'm in. So yeah, you want me to read it? So as a creative, coronavirus has affected me in many different ways. I have been given a time and my mind has been able to slow down, reflect, and restore. When coronavirus first hit, my freelance work took a hard blow. I had to decide between staying in London or moving back to Liverpool. My spirit was shaken. It all happened very quickly. On a Tuesday at home in London, my first day off after 16 days of working, what should have been a day of rest turned into a day of thinking, stressing, contemplating, crying, deliberating, anticipating, reflecting. I came to the decision that moving back to Liverpool was the best option for me. I woke up to Wednesday morning with a sense of clarity. I handed in
Raghav, take.
Sorry, Balika. I think about 30 seconds ago, we lost your sound, and there are a series of not sure faces, which I think I just gathered that we're all facing the same thing. So see if you can just fix the sound and then start from the top for your piece, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, please, yeah, start from the top again. And yeah, hopefully we won't lose you this time.
1 second. Okay, so you can hear me, right? Where should I pick up from?
All good, yeah. Let's go.
Okay, I'll just go back to the beginning of the last section. So I left Liverpool at 19 and moved to Kent to study fashion design, my freedom years. I met a new version of myself and my independence flourished. Once I graduated, moving home wasn't an option for me. My eyes were set on London and my heart wanted to delve straight into the fashion world. For the past 5 years, I have lived and worked within the industry. My experiences have allowed me to open my mind. Yes, I have gained knowledge and skills, but more importantly, I've understood myself, who I am. I am bold, strong, confident, silly, mature, complicated, sweet, rude sometimes, understanding, and so much more. I have London to thank for my sense of self. After a sleepless night, I was hit with the reality of Thursday. The van was loaded by 11 a.m. I packed up my car and started to drive. This time it felt different. This time there was no set return journey. I arrived up north by 3 p.m. and I was greeted with feelings of being homesick, apprehensive, but hopeful. My mother has taught me to always make the most of every situation. For the first time in a long time, I have time. Ample time to work on my business, write my book, and work on my poetry. Productivity has been a dominant force throughout my isolation. The quarantine period has allowed me to decipher who I am and what I value the most. One thing I value highly is my writing. This year I decided to share my poetry for the first time, my thoughts, my words, my truth. The writing workshops I host through my poetry account have given me the most joy. The encouraging feedback and the support for my writing has been overwhelming. I'm able to give in a way I haven't given before. I'm grateful for the family and friends I have around me, and I am thankful for the change I have experienced. I hope for more positive change. Change happens so quickly, and most of the time it's when your mind is elsewhere, and so your heart takes a sudden blow of unexpected situation, unforeseen adjustment, a whirlwind of emotions that your head can't seem to set straight. Your heart will overcome the overwhelming disruption. It sows its feet, takes a moment, your attention becomes more focused. Change is not always bad, it comes in waves and is larger at times. That's when it feels heavy. The weight on your shoulders pushing you downwards, your heart takes over, your mind begins to settle and see that the unanticipated can be celebrated. Allow yourself time to reflect, add to the value of you. Only you can determine your path. Adjust your mind to thinking differently. Open your eyes to see the same situation from another perspective, for positivity and change. Release and set your hope free. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Balika. It's a very beautifully written piece, and as I said, very relatable. And I think it's a very good thing that you're seeing the benefits in your decision and of you being in Liverpool right now. And I think making the most of that time, which is very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And to all of you as well for your reflections. Raghav, back to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Aman, Raki, Balika, and Kajal. What's great to see is that you submitted for Creativity in Crisis, but you guys have all got your own things going on. You know, either you're blogging, you've got new podcasts coming out, you're already doing writing of your own, which is great to see. So those of you who have just come across these names, watch this space. There's going to be lots that they're going to be doing. It's really exciting to see them, follow them on Instagram and sort of get in touch with them with your thoughts. Now, there's been a lot of, there's been a reference with Balika's piece about moving away, so from one place to another. Now, that sort of brings us to our next section where we're joined by Akshaya and Isha. Now, Akshaya, she actually had to move from the UK to Singapore, and she's actually just a few days come back again. So she's actually to do a lot of moving around. So and sort of quite a lot of difficult decisions, I imagine. You girls both actually were there on our first creative writing class, and you submitted your pieces after that. And from what I imagine, you did that writing process together. So you can just sort of bounce off each other. But what was it like, you know, doing that writing class together? And what was it like after finally being reunited after so long? Can you just sort of talk us through those moments?
Thank you for having us, Raghav. Isha, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, for those who don't know me, I'm Isha. I'm Aksha's little sister. So I'm just guessing. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I think I'm actually the youngest here. But this experience was actually pretty nice. So when my sister and I were doing the creative writing course with Tattva, it sparked inspiration for both of us on what is happening in our world right now with COVID, etc. And while we are at our homes, safe with all of that comfort during this lockdown period, and during this time, we were actually spending our time by painting together, watching Netflix, binge watching shows, etc. This was actually the first time that we spent together writing something, because we actually have very different tastes. But I think I can proudly say that writing together has joined the list of things that my sister and I would be doing together whenever she comes to visit. And I kind of miss her. Like having her for 2 whole months at home, seeing her every day, and then not seeing her anymore. It kind of feels weird, especially not having her home for about 6 years.
Thank you, Isha. And I came back not too long ago. So what I reflected and penned as we wrote together was actually the uncertainty of home, because I came to the UK 6 months ago, and I'm very privileged to call Britain my home as well, with the amount of people I've been blessed to call family here. But in those moments, with those uncertainty, packing everything up and leaving within 2 hours was not an easy choice. But the silver lining with this whole situation was the opportunity to spend a good few couple of months with the family, which I would have never gotten otherwise. And I came back just a couple of days back, actually, to start work in the NHS tomorrow. But Tattva has given us the opportunity to create these fond memories, because we both decided to push each other out of our comfort zones and just get writing. And we would sit next to each other on the couch, look at each other and say, okay, let's challenge and write something. So we're very grateful for this opportunity. And now we have something to look back and reminisce. And as Isha echoed, I miss my family and I miss home and I miss those moments. But echoing to the words that I penned, I think my home here in Britain has given me a warm welcome back. So I am excited to move forward as well.
Thank you, both of you, for sharing those reflections. And I can imagine, being with family and then moving back brings up a lot of feelings. I'm with my family right now and very glad to be with them to make sure they're all okay, keep an eye on them, and spend that time. But I know that as much as I'm looking forward to some vestiges of normality coming back, I will miss this time for sure. So thank you both for that. I'd now like to invite Vibhuti Patel to the floor. So Vibhuti is a very good friend and personal mentor of mine, and she's also the editor of a very exciting project that Tattva is working on called Beyond the Bindi. If you're not following us on Instagram, I definitely recommend. We're putting out some great content, and Vibhuti, champion that she is spearheading it. So hello, Vib, how are you?
Hi, Viveka. I'm okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone.
Good stuff, good stuff. And I want to talk a little bit about the reflections on your piece, which is called The Simple Pleasure of a Cup of Tea. And you and I both know that we love our cups of chai, right? They're really helping right now. Oh, you've got one right now. Okay, good. I've just got my pani, but cheers to you. So I just wanted to kind of speak to you about, I guess, about what's keeping you sane and happy right now. And cups of tea would be one of those things, but what else is helping right now?
So I think, I guess as I've written in my piece, my cups of tea are helping. Anybody who knows me knows I drink a lot of tea anyway. But actually the cups of tea during lockdown have been a bit bittersweet because I'm one of the people who is at home completely alone. So don't live with anybody else. And actually having a cup of tea is something that's always been very social. And I have lots of friends who live around me. I have lots of colleagues I would normally see on a daily basis with whom I share those cups of tea. And so actually an adjustment has been finding sanity in sharing those cups of tea virtually with people. You and I have had couple of virtual cups of tea together. And just, I think it's really made me appreciate. And when I go back to being able to have contact with the people that I count as my family, whether that's my blood family or the family I've made for myself, just really appreciating the simple things, like just being able to sit next to somebody and have that cup of tea and share that 10 minutes of the day with them. But what else is keeping me sane is, as you said, Beyond the Bindi, which is the project that I am leading as part of Tattva. I've got the scary title of editor-in-chief, and it's an anthology project that we have looking at the idea of feminism and womanhood, but through the lens of our culture. So through Indic culture, Indic values, dharmic perspectives, because I think, women generally, there are a lot of stereotypes that we can get as half of the world's population. But I think when you come with an additional label, when you're part of a minority community somewhere, it's so easy for people to just pigeonhole us and assume that we're all this uniform thing, and we're not. A bit like Creativity in Crisis is doing in telling individual personal stories around how we're all dealing with this crisis. Beyond the Bindi is doing that around what does it mean to be a woman, or what does it mean to have an association with feminism through the lens of our culture, because sometimes there's a lot of negative connotation, like the instantaneous reaction, particularly from people outside our community, can be that we must struggle, we must be very repressed, we must be unequal. Yeah. When actually we come from a culture and a tradition that at its underpinnings has an immense amount of balance and equality within it, and it views the idea of gender and men and women like in quite a revolutionary sort of way. But what we're also looking at is the fact that we as a community have lost some of that. And so we do experience challenges and we do experience conflict. But it's about personal stories. And so actually, this is a little bit of a bit like the pitch for the program earlier. If you haven't looked at what we're doing, but everything that I've said has made you think you might have a story to tell, go to the Tattva pages on social media, find Beyond the Bindi, and just contact us. And we accept submissions from men and women. So we do have male authors contributing as well, because this is about the whole conversation. So yeah, just interacting with the Beyond the Bindi writers and getting that project off the ground has really kept me sane.
Absolutely, and I definitely echo that call to action to everyone. I'm submitting a piece to Beyond the Bindi, and I know others with us today are as well, and really looking forward to us sharing these very unique and important perspectives, especially in this age of representation that we're talking about. Other communities are taking the mic for themselves, and it's good that we're doing it too. So thank you, Vibhuti, for spearheading this project.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, yeah, Vib. Yeah, so if you liked any of that, if you want to follow what that campaign is, how that campaign is unfolding, go to beyondthebindi.com, okay, and go on Instagram if you're on Instagram at Beyond the Bindi, and you can follow all the updates. You can follow the authors as they, because they're going through a process as well. Their ideas change, their ideas refine. The whole narrative starts to come together. So you'll be able to see this through this journey. So join that journey with us, whether you're just going to be listening in, looking at Instagram posts, or even if you're going to contribute and step up there, that would be great. So thanks, Vib, for sharing that with us. We're just moving on now to our next section. So some of you might have been early birds and we're here at 10 a.m. And if you've been here at 10 a.m. for the last couple of Sundays, then you'll notice that we've been doing these creative writing classes. So Shivani Pala was doing our class this morning, and it was all about food. And actually, just before the call, we were saying just how hungry we were. But Shiv's contribution to Creativity in Crisis has been incredible. Her piece is really moving, and I just want to get her to read out her piece. Now, Shiv is a mentor on the Tattva Authorship program, and she's also a director in the city. I did have it with me. She works in the fast-paced London life, which you'll resonate with when you listen to this piece. So I'll let Shiv take the stage.
Thank you, Raghav. I won't persecute you for not knowing what I do on a daily basis. So I could have actually, you can all hear me, right? I could have actually written this piece about being a technophobe and living in constant fear of technology not doing what I need it to at this point in time. But I chose not to do that. I've actually written, well, I'm just going to read the piece and you can all see what I've chosen to write about. So it's called In the Hue of the Balmy Sun. As a mother, coronavirus has given me the opportunity to stop, slow down, and introspect. It is hard to believe that the world falling on its knees in the wake of a global pandemic has forced many of us parents to awaken to the brutal truth that up until now, we just haven't truly got the balance of parenting right. It was in the hue of the balmy, sun-filled Saturday afternoon of Easter weekend that I lay on the picnic mat, on the freshly cut grass of our small but plentiful back garden, with my beautiful little boy staring into my eyes. At that moment, it struck me. Where have the last 5 years gone? 2 weeks overdue, bringing with him considerable birthing and postpartum hardship, that wondrous small bundle of new life had now flourished into this chatty, handsome, rotund little boy with a cheeky glint in his eye and a smile to melt even the hardest of hearts. It was on this mat that his small hands caressed the back of my arm with his forehead wedged against mine, and a look of complete love and awe as he revelled in the opportunity to have my undivided attention. The sun enveloped us with its embrace, and in this moment, I was at peace and fully sure of myself that so many more moments of stillness like this with my son should have happened up until now and should continue to happen going forward. Prior to this forced confinement in our homes, our lives have been fast. Two parents holding down careers in central London, whilst leading full-on social lives, managing a home, as well as trying to ensure we are contributing members of society to the best of our ability. Our boy has fallen into step with this pace of life, spending long, but might I add happy, hours at school throughout the week, followed by the obligatory packed weekend schedule full of classes, birthday parties, and other family and societal commitments. COVID-19 silently and unashamedly knocked on our doors in recent months, bringing chaos, upheaval, economic turmoil, death, loss, grief, a stretched and overworked NHS, and facets of our vulnerable community threatened by this silent killer. Whilst this tumultuous period plays out on the global scene outside the four walls of our home, here in our bubble, our moments of being present, our moments of connectivity, the opportunities to go back to the raw basic principles of quality family time have increased. And right now, we are happy. We play, we have long weekend breakfasts and more dinners around the table. We exercise and walk together. We talk and share. We innovate to bring joy into our daily lives. We team better. And most importantly, we laugh even more. Coronavirus in time will lay down its weapons, and a slightly broken world will attempt to rebuild after this battle. But my hope is that these cherished moments, the gift of time brought to us in the midst of crisis, and the realizations that have come with it will stay. As we lie here in the hue of the balmy weekend sun, he turns, eyes wide and beaming, and says to me, "Mummy, it's been a great day, hasn't it?" "It has, my baby, it has," I say.
Thank you for that, Shivani. I think that last line is just so beautiful. And I think taking a step back to actually really cherish the time that we do have with family right now is something that I'm certainly doing. And your piece is a very apt reminder of the need for all of us to do that, those of us who can right now.
Definitely. I mean,
thank you.
I think we should remember that I wrote this 6 weeks ago, so I might actually feel like curling in a ball and hiding away 6 weeks later after homeschooling and everything else that has come with it. But maybe the bubbles burst. I'm joking. I meant every word of it. So.
Okay. I was trying to make it really moving and beautiful. No, it is moving and beautiful. No, it was beautiful. Moving on to the subject of motherhood, but from a different angle, I'd like to invite Pooja Patel to speak. And Pooja, you're a perinatal health coordinator, aren't you? Would you like to tell everyone what that involves? Because it's a job role that was completely new to me before I heard of it. So over to you.
Pooja, you just need to
Yeah, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so perinatal essentially means before or after the delivery of a baby. So during that period is the perinatal period. So some of you may have heard of pre or postnatal or maternal mental health. So I work in the field of maternal mental health within the charity sector. And my role is predominantly working with BAME communities. And in Birmingham, South Asian community is the second largest after the white British. So a lot of my work has been with South Asian families and moms in particular. And before sort of the lockdown period, a lot of my work was working in communities, raising awareness around maternal mental health, around general health and well-being. And it was fairly quite an easy approach, you know. A lot of the work was done in like children's centres, schools, nurseries, those sorts of things. So it's quite easy to carry out that work. And then when obviously the lockdown happened, I was assigned a caseload to support, to provide telephone support to new mothers from sort of predominantly the Pakistani Indian background. And it was really, really hard because a lot of their families didn't know they were accessing support. You know, we talked about try and go out for your 1 a day walk, and that just wasn't possible for a lot of women. So I kind of wanted to kind of capture those stories within the piece. And just, you know, often we live in a little bubble. We're quite fortunate, a lot of us, we've got great families and friends and support networks at home, whereas a lot of these moms, new moms, didn't have that level of support. So yeah, essentially what I've done is just try to capture some of those stories within the piece, and raise a little bit of awareness around what maternal mental health can look like for particularly South Asian mothers from a very traditional background.
Thanks, Pooja. Yeah, you really shed light on a very niche but clearly very important topic that we just never really come across. And those struggles that you mentioned, you know, I'm sure everyone will now look to your piece as a reference point to what these mothers were going through at this time. So thanks, Pooja, for sharing that with us. Next, we'll be moving to Zima Bhatt. She was one of our first authors on the authorship program a few years back, and she wrote an incredible piece called Invited. Zima, alongside several others, was published on another media channel, iGlobal. You know, she was published alongside Shivani, Vibhuti, Palika and Asha. So all their pieces were put on another media platform to get, and it's really got some more exposure. So great stuff there. Zima, could you take the stage and read Uninvited for us?
Thank you. So for those of you who've got your books, my piece is the second one in the book, Whoever Wants to Follow. And I'm just gonna, give it a go. As a bird watcher, Corona has turned the tables around. Are the birds watching me, or am I watching them? I ponder with a cup of chai, leaning against my double-glazed door, leading out to the garden. I catch a glance of a blue tit. Feeding on the backboard, I stand staring with the anticipation of catching a sight of another. Ungracefully, a wood pigeon turns up. What a disappointing sight, I say aloud. Atithi Devo Bhava. I hear a voice in the background. The guest is God. Really? I think distastefully. Atithi Devo Bhava and a pigeon? It eats all the seeds, poos in the water bowl, and calls upon the rest of its gang to make my garden their new hangout place. No Atithi Devo Bhava to pigeons. I sternly say to myself. In the midst of my battle with the wood pigeon, I hear a distinctive calling, cow. I notice the jet black marble eyes of death perch on my fence.
Thank you for that, Zima. Quite the ornithologist, aren't you? That was really funny and warm. A nice little piece to listen to at this time. So thank you for sharing that, and reminding me that I should actually take up a bit of bird watching as another hobby to spend the days now at this time. Thank you. So now I would like to invite two more contributors to the table. We have Sumit Sharma and Prithvi Shah, both of whom have discussed the subject of seva in their pieces. And Sumit, I'll turn to you first because I follow you on Instagram and I know that you've been spending a lot of time wearing your PPE and cooking food, preparing food for local communities as an act of seva. Could you share a little bit about that experience for us?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, when Corona hit, when things changed very rapidly, there's an organization called Seva there that operates nationally. You know, you just get a phone call to say, you know, can you help out? Do you have time? And of course, the answer is almost always yes. And then you turn up and I'm standing with a bunch of people I've grown up with that I've gone to some very youth clubs and other organizations. And it's like, right, we need to muck in now. We need to stand up a kitchen. We need to make sure we're distancing. We need to follow these guidelines. And we've got to feed hundreds of people a day. And so for me, you know, working full time, Monday to Friday, not able to be there, but then the Saturday, Sundays where I do have some time to just go donate some of that time, just be present and be another cog in that machine. I have to say it's been very humbling. I don't think I have an exceptional set of skills at all, but it's when you have a collection of people that muck in together for a cause is when change can occur, is when things, you know, you have a snowball effect. And that's how we can contribute to wider society.
Thank you, Sumit, for sharing that experience. And you're absolutely right. I think when we all muck in together and work as part of a team, that's when a real change can be made. And I think it's a very proactive and important thing for everyone to be doing right now. And by doing what you're doing, I think you set an example to the rest of us. So thank you for doing that and for sharing those reflections in your piece, which again, everyone watching, I would invite you to read in the book, Creativity in Crisis. Be sure to buy a copy if you don't have one already. Thank you for holding it up, Sumit. Good stuff. And next, Prithvi, I'd like to speak to you because you've got some interesting reflections as well. What does seva mean to you, especially at this time right now?
Thank you, Devika. So by no means am I an expert in the definition of seva, but I can share what I've learned over the years. And I think everyone is very familiar of the word volunteering, whether that's you know, at school, uni, or you know, a work volunteer project, or scrolling through social media during lockdown and seeing, you know, like Sumitji very well explained, the PPE kit and actively and physically participating. But the term seva, the Sanskrit term, for me at least, goes way beyond volunteering. And sometimes it's quite difficult to gauge what that term is and sort of defer it from volunteering. But somebody once explained to me what seva can mean, and it can translate into compassion. And that really resonated with me because often we are always thinking about the end goal. You know, I'm doing this or we're doing this collectively and the last achievement that, you know, you want to get to. But for me, whenever I've either participated in a seva activity or during lockdown, I haven't actually spent much time outside of the house, but I've probably built up a lot of good relationships through Zoom and so on. And it's really the process. And, you know, for example, building those relationships is actually a key part of seva because you're sharing that compassion from one person to another. And it can be like these workshops that Tattva have, you know, so amazingly done every Sunday morning. And it's just sharing those skills. That in itself, to me, is a part of seva because you're sharing one's compassion to another through storytelling.
Thank you, Prithvi. That's a really good point. I think seva is one of those words which is it's hard to translate, particularly to the English language. So I think seeing as compassion adds another and very vital level to the word, which I think is important to really stress and communicate. And a question to both of you now, because there's lots of talk about compassion and community and kindness right now, which some might say has been lacking previously and only really comes out during times of crisis. Do you think it will stick now? Do you think finally we've learned that we need it?
I don't know. man has been searching for answers for these things for millennia. We've written books thousands of years ago, and we here digitally, you know, can stimulate our minds with such. So, and it's interesting, something that I think Dheerji and Amanji said earlier, you only become aware of problems in the crisis. And so is the lack of seva or the need for seva become heightened in this pandemic? Yes. Will it continue to say so? I don't know, it's a short answer to say time will tell, but through collective efforts like the people on this call, like the various other things going on, there, at least I think there will be a small subset of society that will continue, and it's through that shared ethos and doing things like this will that grow. So you've got to, I think like Rajivji actually said at the beginning, we are at a time where we're in this moment and we're going to set the narrative for what comes forward. The stories people will hear of 50, 100 years down the line may just be the ethos that we think about and deliberate on today.
Thank you, Sumit.
Quickly add to that, I think, I'm not sure whether it will continue in terms of seva and activity, but I think people will definitely reflect more. And when I was reading other people's stories, either some people just didn't have the time to reflect because it's such a rush, especially those in the medical field, or those who, you know, have actually taken this opportunity to reflect. And I think the reflection part of it will definitely continue.
Thank you both. I think a nice nugget of hopefulness for to almost end on there. And thank you for doing all you're doing and for sharing your reflections with Creativity in Crisis. Raghav, back over to you.
Thank you. So our final contribution that we're going to be introducing is Karthik Bharadia. He had written a piece called The Time, but Karthik actually contributed in more ways than just the written piece. He was very much a part of the process in terms of getting this book together, and particularly from the editorial side, getting the book available on Amazon, getting all the formatting done, which actually there's lots to do there. So Karthik put a lot of time into this, and actually I'd invite Karthik to actually share more about this journey that the whole project Creativity in Crisis went through, and perhaps just conclude with any sort of more parting words you had going forward.
Hi, Raghav, Devika, and all the authors. Thanks for having me speak. But yeah, I mean, look, firstly, congratulations to everyone here for contributing to something that's so impactful and will have a lasting impression, but also more immediately, you know, we've achieved to raise a significant sum of monies for a charity that's doing so much at a time that the funds are needed. So I guess the journey has been quite a big one for Tattva. Firstly, really, we just started with the idea of responsibility. When there's a crisis, everyone, every organization, every group of people, network can come together to respond in whatever way they feel is right at the time. And for Tattva, it was essentially, how do we enable people to channel their energy in a positive way? So we started with what some of the authors here, in fact, all of the authors here, I believe, attended, and many other viewers attended, were sort of online guided writing sessions. And those then eventually transformed into us asking for submissions. And then we thought, what could we do? Let's do more with these submissions. And so this publication, Creativity in Crisis, was born. But I suppose if I just draw back a little bit, I guess one of the common threads here for all of us is the idea of suffering. And I want to take a quote from a favorite book, which most of us will have read, from Shantaram. And he talks about the difference between pain and suffering. And he says, the difference, I'm going to read the quote off because I can't quote it exactly and I'll get it wrong. So here we go. So the difference between them is, I think, that we learn from pain. For example, fire burns and is dangerous, is always individual, for ourselves alone. But what we learn from suffering is that is that it's what that unites us as one human people. And that idea of one human people, I think, is what's kind of captured in this book. Some of the authors have used the word Vasudev Kutumbakam. You know, we as Hindus believe there's a, you know, it's one big family, and I think that's what's come together today in this book. So the spirit of creativity in crisis from a press house, I suppose, if that's what your question was, Raghav, was two main things. One, we had to work at pace because we really wanted to capture the essence of what's happening in these micro stories. We've had so many diverse stories, and we wanted to capture the real essence when it's happening. And books often take long. We worked on other publications. It'll be a year, 18-month cycle, but we really turned this around within sort of 8 weeks. So that was one challenge. And then the second challenge, of course, was impact. We wanted to raise good amount of money. We wanted to impact the world when they really were aware or hyper-sensitized by this issue so that we could maybe make more sales from a commercial point of view. And obviously all the proceeds were going to go to the charity. So it made sense to work at that pace. And the authors were great. Everyone submitted in such good speed. And we captured some really good quality pieces, a diverse range there. And then obviously from our point of view was how do we marry up these different pieces that are written in different styles, formats, and getting a common sort of editorial pattern amongst them. So that was sort of the things that we as a press house learned. But I hope really from all of this, we've broadened our network, all these authors, and we've had at least 2 or 3 authors approach us with other book ideas and so on. And so I think we'll definitely be showering the world with even more beautiful ideas and stories. And we'll definitely be looking to do sort of anthologies of this type. So yeah, I welcome all the authors to sort of work together. And that's what's made this whole project a success.
Thanks, Karthik. And just before we finish, Dheerajji, thank you for sitting with us this time. Now you've sort of listened through a lot of the perspectives and stories. Could you just share with us and the public who are with us on Facebook Live some parting pearls of wisdom?
It's more than 90 minutes that I'm sitting here and listening to you all. Since morning, I've been jumping from one conference call to another one. Yeah, it's very, I'm really delighted, very happy. We are creating future writers and also opinion makers. These are the grounds, the initial grounds where you start putting up your thoughts and then also influencing your thoughts to others. Even on short pieces, it makes a big difference. Our community lacked this. In my generation or generation next to me, we never had this feeling of writing or anything. We normally spoke and just did our work and continued this. But I think your generation has the ability and also a scope to put the values and our systems and civilization in the words that the world will understand. I think you have that knack, you got that ability, and I'm sure Tattva will play a very big role. Get connected with it. There's always blessings to Tattva. I'm always interested that Tattva grows, and I'll be very delighted to see some award-winning writers coming out of this group. I really look to, and particularly, I never imagined Devika conducting this. You grown up, and I'm really very happy, and tears come in my eyes that you've grown up and conducted, and Raghav as well, and all the blessings and best wishes to Tattva. And I hope in my lifetime I can see a couple of you get an international or national awards in writing. That will be a big thing for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dheerajji. That was very, very kind of you, seriously. That brings us to the end of the launch of Creativity in Crisis. We've got some phenomenal writers and individuals joining us today, contributing to this book. From Dheeraj to Vibhuti, all of you, you've all been absolutely fantastic. And I've loved speaking to and listening to all of you today. And Raghav, I'm sure you'll agree, this has been great, hasn't it? It's been a wonderful way to spend a Sunday.
Yeah, no, it's been really, really good, actually. Amazing, really nourishing. Some of the stories that have come out have really made me reflect, and some have brought a tear to my eye, some have made me chuckle. So those of you who have joined us on Facebook Live, thank you for taking the time out and sitting with us. There are two things you need to do today now. One is to get up, stretch your legs and get in the sun, because you've probably been sat there for a while. And also, if you haven't already, go on to tattva.org.uk. You got Creativity in Crisis. Okay, so if you look for
everyone's holding them up.
Yeah, and get yourself a copy. Okay, so you're gonna it's available on paperback, it's available on ebook. So however you want it, it'll be with you. It'll be with you in a few days. But the main thing is we're doing it all to raise money for the National Emergencies Trust. So we're really trying to give back to those who need it most at this time through these incredible stories. So thanks all the authors, everyone who's contributed, everyone from the team who have edited and stayed with me and us late at night to work on this project. It's been really great having you on board. This is just the beginning for stories like this from everyone. So thank you all. And we'll
thank you, everyone.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll be in touch about our next endeavor.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Bye.
rest of the day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.